We arrived back in London Heathrow. Everything was really rather strange. It was just strange, and everything felt strange. We stayed in a hotel overnight. Obviously, we had to have our food in our rooms because we couldn't mix with anybody. It was still locked down. We drove from London to pick up our dogs. We each had a puppy which we'd had to leave in England when we left to return to Spain back in March. And we'd left it with a family member. They were beautifully looked after. We picked them up. Our family chose not to see us or, speak to us that day because the government guidelines were that we shouldn't mix. So we literally just picked up the dogs and we drove down to Chichester. We'd arranged to stay a couple of nights in an Airbnb in Chichester because I was desperate to see Dad. I hadn't realised at that time, I guess, that, or I hadn't remembered, that in fact, if you were travelling from another country, you had to self isolate for 2 weeks. So we stayed that couple of nights in Chichester. Then we drove to another Airbnb that we'd organised in Taunton for 1 month. And our mission in that month was to find a house to rent that was big enough for all the family to come back to and a couple of dogs. So it seemed like quite a big task to complete because we didn't even know where we were going to go, which area we were going to head for. But we did head up to Glastonbury and Street during our first days. We did manage to make contact with a couple of local estate agents. We were allowed to stand at the door and sort of call our requirements into them. And both of them said we'd be very, very lucky. They certainly had nothing on their books that was big enough to accommodate us all. So we felt a little bit despondent, but I think it was within 24 hours, we had a call from one of the agents to say that a very unusual thing had happened. A local person in Glastonbury had literally walked into their office, handed over her keys, and said that she wanted them to rent their house out. And it was a beautiful, big house on the outskirts of Glastonbury. Did we want to see it? Yes, we did. So we went along, we had a look, it was perfect. The owner came along and met us and immediately said we could rent the house. And the icing on the cake was she left most of the furniture there for us. So we were very lucky. It was sent to us. It was a gift from the universe. We were very happy. And on the 8th of July 2020, we moved into our new rental accommodation in Glastonbury. We ended up staying there just over 2 years, actually, and it was a very lovely base for us during that time. A very beautiful place to be. It had a lovely garden, lovely outside space, because we had two lockdowns in that house, and so the outside space was very useful to us. So there we were in England. Joe joined us at the end of the summer, as arranged. He flew back at the end of August, and a month later, his beautiful dog, Oni, hitched a ride in a van, which left our hometown at the end of September and brought him back to us. So he joined us too. The house didn't sell. Bob stayed in Spain. I was able to visit Dad after a couple of weeks of our arrival, so from the end of June. And I used to take a train from Castle Carey, very pretty station, about a half-hour drive from Glastonbury. And I had quite a long journey. I got a train, I think, just after 7 in the morning, few changes, and I eventually got to Dad by 11. I was allowed to see him for 1 hour at a distance in the car park. Luckily, the weather was fine. I don't think Dad really completely understood why we couldn't give each other a hug. And I know he followed the news, but it was all horrible. So it was lovely to see him, and it was heartbreaking to leave him every time. I think I was allowed to see him each week, maybe every 10 days. I can't quite remember. And then the home weren't happy that I was coming on a train to see him, even though we were sitting outside. Luckily, by that time, Joe was pretty much on his way back to England. As I said, he came back end of August. So he started driving me down, and I saw Dad as much as I could. I spoke to him every day on the phone, so that was lovely. We still had our daily chats. We still made plans together, and I tried to keep his dreams going, his hopes going. He wanted his passport renewed. That was a tricky job because he couldn't sign carefully within the lines you have to. So it went back and forward and back and forward. I knew in my heart he wouldn't probably travel again, but I wanted his hope. I wanted him to have hope. That was important. So I continued visiting him through the autumn, and I made my last visit to him on the 22nd of December 2020, when he was not able to speak to me and seemed asleep. Though I really, really felt he could hear me. I was allowed into his room. So I sat with him and held his hand. I was able to hug him and give him a kiss and tell him how much I loved him. And thank God I had that couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours with him. And I chose to talk to him about his life. I talked through his life, everything I knew about his life. And I told him I felt this was the last time we would be together in this lifetime. And I had to leave him because I wasn't allowed to stay with him. So I left him. And 2 days later, I had the call to say he'd passed. And so that was Christmas Eve. And all I could really think was how much Dad loved Christmas and how happy he would be to be with Mum again for Christmas, rather than sitting in a room on his own because we weren't allowed to see him. So that gave me a lot of comfort. So we went through Christmas into 2021. That Christmas of 2020, I'm sure we were in another lockdown from the November onwards, all through Christmas. And we came out of the lockdown, as I say, into the new year of 2021, and life went on. I think that concludes the answer to my second question and the story I told at my book launch on the 8th of February this year. My story of COVID and the lockdowns. And of course, my story continues throughout all of my books. So back to the books. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I've enjoyed sharing my story and the writers that I've met through the years. Back in 2021, I knew all the writers because for my first book, I'd contacted friends, people that I knew. A couple of new people were introduced to me, but going through the years, other people have joined, other writers have joined, people have stepped forward and said, could I share my story? I've been introduced to other people. Back in 2023, I had an interview with a wonderful man called Richard Vobes, who had a huge following then and does now. And that gave me a lot of visibility. A lot of people from across the world contacted me, and they encouraged me to continue collecting stories. Some of the people became writers, and one of them actually was so inspired, he started collecting stories in his home country of New Zealand. So that was all very exciting. And I have to say, if you haven't read any of my books, I encourage you to go out and buy one of them or all of them and support my work. Enjoy the stories. I've laughed and cried through the stories. It shows people's strengths, vulnerabilities, the happy times, the sad times. There's so much in the books, and I think it's been a wonderful experience, and I've loved giving the opportunity to people to share their stories. So I think that's probably about it. If you do want to uh, look at my website, it is www.memoriesoflockdown.com. And for anyone in the UK who would like to order a book, that's the way to do it, through my website. For anybody in another country making an international order, please go onto Amazon. I don't like to use Amazon, but hey ho, sometimes it serves a purpose. I will leave it there. Thank you so much. Oh, I know one thing I just wanted to say is I have started interviewing my writers. I've interviewed two writers so far. I'm calling it my Getting to Know You series because I have a lot of readers who have felt that they've got to know the writers through the four books. And wouldn't it be fun to actually hear them? And that inspired me to start suggesting that I do chat interviews with my writers. So for any writer that wishes to speak to me, that's what I'm going to be doing going forward. And it's lovely for me as well, because as I say, some of the writers I've never met, I've never heard them speak. So it's also getting to know them for me. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to me. I hope I haven't rambled too much, and I'll be back. Bye now. Bye.